All right. Good evening. And welcome back to the side event. So my name is Ben Wisman. You probably received an email from me inviting you to come to this event, and I'm very happy to see you here. It's my pleasure to welcome you as the manager of the Nutrition Impact Platform from the CGIAR. So tonight is a very interesting night for me. I have with me 2 out of 3 daughters of Dr. M.S. Swaminathan. So we have to spread them out in 2 different sessions so that they can contribute effectively to the conversation. Now, if you still do not know who Dr. Swaminathan is, I didn't know him until 2021, in fact. I have to admit, I only knew him when Shakuntala came to me, and after she got her World Food Prize, I had to find out, what is this World Food Prize? And that was where I learned about Dr. M.S. Swaminathan. But having learned from that and having heard many stories, it's only fitting that we do a tribute to him tonight. So Dr. M.S. Swaminathan was the inaugural World Food Prize Laureate in 1987. And he was recognized for his significant contribution in the Green Revolution and his research on important crops, including potato, wheat, and of course, rice. His contributions went beyond just improving breeding lines, but it also brought a social aspect to it. He included women in rice farming systems, and it was important for him to realize a goal of a world without hunger. Now, this approach is continued today through the M.S. Swaminathan Research Foundation, but not just there. It is the philosophy and his legacy is seen through many different people, many different centers. And I mean, any one of us, I think we do carry a little bit of Dr. Swaminathan's philosophy in the work that we do. So without much further ado in my introduction, I do have a long paragraph. I'm not going to read all of it. May I please now transition to the first video? We have a message from our EMD.
Today, I would like to honor the life and legacy of a visionary who transformed global agriculture, Dr. Swaminathan. His work was not just a testament to the power of science, but the power of humanity, dedication, and the unyielding pursuit of food security for all. Widely known as the father of India's Green Revolution, Dr. Swaminathan's innovation in plant breeding and his advocacy for food security transformed Indian agricultural landscape and provided a blueprint for the world. His introduction of high-yielding wheat and rice varieties played a pivotal role in averting a potential famine, lifting millions out of hunger and poverty. But his vision extended far beyond increased yield. He understood that food security meant more than just feeding people. It was about empowering communities and building resilient agricultural systems. Dr. Swaminathan's deep collaboration with CGIAR reflected his belief that science, when harnessed with compassion and inclusion, could truly change the world. During his tenure as the DG of the International Rice Research Institute, one of our key centers, Dr. Swaminathan worked to develop more resilient and productive rice varieties, ensuring that this staple crop could continue to feed billions, even in the face of climate change. And as the former board chair of the International Water Management Institute, he was an advocate for the critical role of water management plays in agricultural sustainability. He believed that farming systems must integrate not only crops but also livestock, fisheries, and forestry, approaching agriculture holistically to build stronger rural communities and healthier ecosystems. This year, our Professor Lindy Wesibanda, chair of the CGIAR Integrated Partnership Board, received the prestigious Swaminathan Global Leadership Award for Sustainable Development. This eponymous award reminds us that his work continues to inspire the next generation of leaders. And one of Dr. Swaminathan's greatest legacy is his commitment to serving the marginalized. Through his foundation, he empowered rural communities, ensuring that the voices of the most vulnerable were heard in the Sustainable Development Dialogue. His concept of the Evergreen Revolution, a movement for sustainable agriculture, continues to guide efforts today, reminding us of the importance of environmental stewardship in all that we do. At CGIAR, we are very proud to continue the journey you started. Thank you for showing the world what is possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and a special thanks to the team who brought together this video. Dr. Ismahan Ilofi, she's the Executive Managing Director for the CGIAR. She couldn't be here in person, although we tried to get her, so she sent this video over to us. Now, we do not have a keynote speech, right? It's only fitting that we invite a panel to come forward and join me on stage to share their experiences. So please allow me to invite, firstly, Madhura Swaminathan. She is a professor at the Indian Statistical Institute. She was the chair of the MS Swaminathan Research Foundation. And of course, she is one of the two daughters of Dr. MS Swaminathan here in the room tonight. It is very tight, so we have to be very careful. So, the next panelist that I'm inviting on stage is actually Massimo Torero. He is the chief economist at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. So please join me with him. You can take the center seat, Mr. I have to be a little bit of a seat coordinator too. Next, allow me to invite Dr. Yvonne Pinto. She is the new Director General for the Institute of the International Rice Research Institute, IRRI. Joining us on stage, may I please invite Senthil Kumar Kalimutu. He is an extension agronomist and he works with Africa Rice. Last but not least, allow me to invite on stage Shakuntala Thilstead. She is the 2021 World Food Prize Laureate. She did not introduce herself earlier in her session. And she is also the director for the Nutrition Impact Platform with the CGIAR. Thank you. Now I'd like to start this conversation, of course, with Madhura. Madhura, this is something very personal, right? A tribute to your dad. But you've also been involved in carrying his legacy in his work, especially through the MS Swaminathan Research Foundation, and now in your work with India, right? So what are the lessons that we can learn from his life and his work as we move towards nourishing all people?
But thank you to the CGIAR Nutrition Impact Platform and Shakuntala and Ben for putting this together. I think, let me start by saying that some of you probably know much more of my father and his professional work than I do. So I'll just say a few things. I think one thing which is very sort of impressed upon my mind, at least, is following what Ismahan also mentioned, unwavering commitment to food security. I mean, till almost the day he died. It's like, it was not something as a career of 30 years or 60. In fact, his working life was about almost 70 years. So from the age of, say, 25 or so after finishing graduate studies. And even when he was not comfortable reading a newspaper, and we would read out some, because he was getting headaches, we would read out some important items question would always be, tell me about the progress of the monsoon, because that's what concerns the farmers. The monsoon is the summer rains, in the much of Asia and India. So I think this, everyday concern about what was happening to farmers welfare and food security is just something. I don't know. It's difficult to. Something that remains in your mind. Second thing, which he always said after he started the MS Swaminathan Research Foundation with money from the World Food Prize. So it was a post-retirement after 6 years or so as DG at IRI, and was very active for about at least, the foundation is now almost completed 35 years, for about 30 years, very active. Built up an institution many of you know about. And I think one motto, which is again quite instructive, is he said, I'm dependent on donors, but not donor-driven in my agenda. I think that's a very, many organizations, we need resources from others, but you can't bend your agenda too much. You have to have your own agenda. And one of the unique things about, I think, the foundation MSSRF, it's a non-profit, it's registered as an NGO, charitable trust, but over these 30 years, there were more than 80 PhD students who completed their doctoral work at the foundation. So it was action and research, genuinely not action research. And we talk about all these things, but it was taking science to society, having a whole set of programs, but also having students seriously examine these issues. PhD has a rigorous process. It's not just writing a paper, but actually evaluating the kind of ongoing work. I'll just say two quick things. I have a couple of minutes. The two things which he talked about a lot when he started the foundation, one was called anticipatory research. And I think, at least in India, I don't know, one of the first institutions to start a program on climate change and focusing on coastal areas because of, and looking at salt-tolerant crops like rice and halophytes, which are sort of salt-loving plants and so on, a mangrove bioshield for the coast of Tamil Nadu in the wake of the tsunami. So the recognition that sea level rise and salt tolerance and so on would become important issues. And in fact, it makes me think we're all talking about 2 degrees centigrade. I think our research should be for 4 degrees or more. I mean, we have to anticipate what is coming. Our research problem has to look a little into the future. The second thing he talked about a lot and implemented, I shouldn't say just talked about, implemented, participatory research. It was mentioned by Ben and others. The idea of the foundation was to work with farm women and men, as well as, women and men in rural areas who didn't have their own land, so landless women and men. And I'll just give one example here that I remember one of the first activities that was started just bordering Tamil Nadu in Puducherry. Some of you might have been there, the BioVillage program. The first knowledge center, a center where there would be information available on a computer for the people of the village, was set up in what we call in Tamil Nadu the Cherry, which is the area of the village where the poorest, the most marginalized, the oppressed scheduled castes would be living. And somebody said to him, why are you doing it there? Don't you want it to be in the main part of the village? And he said, I know, because if it's in the main part of the village, the scheduled castes won't be allowed to come. But if I set up a center there, everybody else will go there and want to see, and participate in this. So I think I'll just end by saying that this philosophy, it's, I don't know if I've imbibed this lesson, I think that would be going too far, but philosophy of Antyodaya, what we say in Antyodaya in in Hindi in India, that thinking about the last person, thinking about the most marginalized in whatever you do. And well, he's not here today, but I think he would have spoken up about the famine in Gaza.
Thank you so much, Madhura. Now, I'd like to turn over to Massimo. Massimo, you are right up there, in the FAO, helping to guide the world in achieving food and nutrition security. And Dr. Swaminathan's work left an indelible mark in the history of global agricultural development, firstly teaching us to feed the hungry, but then he moves on to nourishing all people. So in your opinion, what are the key lessons that we can learn from his work, and how do we really effectively transition to this nourishing all people?
Thank you so much, and it's an honor for me to be here, and thank you for the invitation. One of the major challenges that we face in the areas that we work is being able to see the tomorrow, to see the future. And when I was looking at the work of Dr. Swaminathan, it's clear that he looked at the tomorrow. He understood where were the challenges and what we need to do. And being able to read now what he was doing then and look at what we're trying to do now, it's very similar. It's basically the same. And we have bigger challenges that we still have not. So for me, there are four major things that I can capture from his work and which I think which will nourish. And first is science, science and innovation and the tools to assure sustainability. I think he was a science-driven person. He was super successful in the Green Revolution and what he did in India. And it's something that today normally we forget about, and we talk a lot, put a lot of labels to things, and we don't base those labels on science and hard science work. So I think that is central of his work, and I think it's something that is a complex challenge, and it's something that we need to continue doing. One of the things that we're trying to do is to be science-driven in as much as we can. And that is not only related to technological innovation, but going from the crop, from the soils, up to the consumers and trying to achieve the goals that we have in mind. And the challenges that we have today are as bad as before. The famines that we are facing today are created, are not famines because of necessary lack of food or because of droughts. Most of them are because of conflict or wars. And that is kind of inconsistent, no? Why we have that. And one of the second lessons from me is the link to social equity and what he was trying to do in terms of being inclusive in the work he did. So it was a recognition that food security is not just a technical issue, but also a social one. And we miss that point in most of the cases, no? We have a world which is very unequal, a world which is very different. And normally we don't reach the people which are more far on that distribution. And we look at it as statistics, but we don't do that effort to include them and to find ways and solutions to include them. And honestly, we have improved over history in terms of hunger, but we have become more unequal. And COVID-19 helped enormously to increase that inequality and to go backwards in more than 15 years. So I think trying to come up with inclusive policies that will bring the minorities, not only women and women empowerment. Women is very, very empowered lately, so it's very strong. But we need to keep working on that because it has to be a structural change. But we also need to bring indigenous people of lower caste, people which are normally discriminated in very clear ways, but also in subtle ways. I come from a country where discrimination is pretty subtle, but it's pretty bad. In India, it's more clear how it works, but in Bangladesh too. But I think we need to keep working in trying to break those norms, and human capital building is a way, and that's why his foundation helps also to build human capital PhDs in the topic. Then the third topic for me, which was amazing, is what you mentioned about climate and the issues related to climate change. And those are the huge challenges we have. You were mentioning anticipatory. Okay, so I am spending most of my life in the last 2 years on anticipatory action, but trying to find ways in which we can predict those shocks. No, all the systems that we have in place today of early warning, they don't have nothing of early. They are just warnings when the event has happened.
Okay.
Most of our insurance systems require the event to happen to be able to trigger. Very few cases, ENSO on El Niño, La Niña, we use probability distributions to trigger thresholds before even the event happened. And that's where anticipatory action could happen. So what he was trying to do, I think, is a precursor of all the work that is happening right now. But there is a huge transformation, because imagine if I can predict a conflict even, which is one of the risks. We're working right now with 12 risks. Conflict is a risk. It's a risk that in most of the African countries is a recurrent problem. So it's not so difficult to predict it, sadly. But there is no insurance related to that. So again, there is a lot of data and analysis that we have to do. And again, he was also very worried about the overuse of chemical pesticides and fertilizers and so on. And that's something that is also so important. And finally, the idea of this holistic approach, and not just doing one thing and being in a silo, but bringing the system. And that's where I always argue that we have to learn a lot from indigenous people. And that's why the Waipala paper that was done with HLPF, in the sense that for them, from the beginning, they think of a system, and they don't think of silos. Of course, they don't have the science methods that we use, but I think there is a lot of work that we can do to try to systematize. And the CGIAR is trying to do that. They did that in potatoes in my country, in Peru. But I think he was also doing that in a different way. But this holistic approach will be central. So those will be my very four takeaways and learning. It's so nice to learn from what they did in the past. And let's see if we can do a little bit better than what they did, but it's so complex.
Thank you so much, Massimo. And something that really struck me is that Dr. Swaminathan, he took a holistic point of view 30 years before the world started to talk about holistic food systems transformation. He brought in the women, he brought in the technology, he brought in all these different aspects, even before we were mainstreaming all these talks, right? Today we are talking about it. Of course, 30 years later, in a way, he was a visionary in his own right. Now I'd like to turn over to Yvonne. Tough question to you. It's how do you carry the torch forward? Now, a little bit of context is that Dr. Swaminathan, he received his World Food Prize, also largely in recognition of his work done when he was the Director General in IRRI, right? And you're now the next generation. Bravo! And so how do you see that? How are we going to anticipate, your work and your actions in carrying the torch forward, and also maybe expanding the flame to guide more people towards Nourishing Nation?
Thanks, Ben, and thank you, Shakuntala, and to the Impact Platform for Nutrition for inviting me. I have a general story which answers your question, and then I have a little bit of a personal reflection to share with you. What I'm really convinced of is that MS Swaminathan was a truly transformative individual, not simply in what he did or how he did it, but the people that he brought along with him. And so I wanted to sort of pay homage to some of the things that he was the forefather of, which we still believe today are really, really important in the way forward. So one of the critical things was the notion of high-yielding crop varieties. Now, he was very well known for the work that he did on rice and wheat, but he collaborated with many people and developed both high-yielding and disease-resistant. So when you think about holistic in the context of these technologies, these are compound technologies. They're dealing with multiple constraints. These varieties took an approach called crossbreeding. So productivity and sustainability were built into the mix. And they really were responsible for saving millions of people's lives. There are very few examples in the world where you can actually create attribution for the work of an individual, or indeed just the vision of that individual manifesting. So he also played critical roles in bringing people along. He worked at the Indian Council of Agricultural Research as a scientist. If you consider that institution today, there are very few institutions globally that compare. It is incredibly sophisticated. But he was instrumental in launching what is known as India's Green Revolution. It helped a country, a nation, to shift from scarcity to self-sufficiency. He turned India into one of the largest producers of rice and wheat, and the Indian agriculture and science community actually believes that developing high-yielding basmati varieties and using a technology known as mutation and the application of genetics increased both food production, food security, and launched new approaches, these participatory approaches. He termed that lab to land. So for his own nation, he contributed something truly unique. Now, he obviously advocated for sustainable practices. He wanted to see these high-yielding varieties in the context of ecological farming methods. So he talked about biodiversity conservation. He talked about the need for policies that both ensure food security, but without degrading natural resources. I'm going to take a second to just tell you, I came from the OECD, where they are debating at the policy level of 30 to 40 nations how you measure sustainable agriculture. What are the indicators we should use, not simply for production, but for the environmental component of sustainability? And not only that, but in the debates that we had in the day was how do you factor in the social elements? Not simply participation and the right to determine one's future, but the opportunity to include human health outcomes as part of our nutritional system. And I wanted to say a little bit about, on the occasion that he was presented with the World Food Prize in 1987, the then Secretary General of the United Nations, Javier Perez de Cuellar, said, "Dr. Swaminathan is a living legend. His contributions to agricultural science have made an indelible mark on food production in India and elsewhere in the developing world. By any standards, he will go into the annals of history as a world scientist of rare distinction." Furthermore, he used that prize money to start the foundation. He used his voice in shaping agricultural policies in India and internationally, and he promoted the policies that address climate change, the land use rights, farmer welfare, and public health concerns related to food production. Again, a compound proposition with many moving parts. He obviously had a tremendous global influence on food security. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about what he actually did for IRRI, the institution that I have the great fortune to be responsible for. He served as the Director General of IRRI from 1982 to 1988. During his tenure, he focused on advancing rice research to obviously improve yields and resilience. He played this very pivotal role in the development of high-yielding varieties, which increased significantly food production in Asia. Have to give me a second there. Somehow my Uber trip has suddenly manifested. Not fun. He created what is called the Philippine Rice Research Institute, and that was the first opportunity for the national systems to be complemented by the global and international system. He played a very, very important part in training large numbers of people all over the world. He decided that training would be combined with technology transfer, and he established a new technology transfer division at IRRI. He created a program of women in rice farming to study, obviously, the contributions that women make to rice farming. And he was an advocate of multiple cropping systems. I think we heard a little bit about some of that work through Ismahan and her video. During the course of his IRI Pioneer interview sessions on the 10th and 11th of October 2006 in his office in New Delhi, he hit the nail on the head when he stated, "Life becomes more interesting when some old challenges are solved and new ones come along. We need new challenges to enter the 21st century, and as you can see, we have them. An institute such as IRI should always be ready to change course. If it is not, it will be passed by others." He clearly established a leading institution in agricultural research. So I want to tell you that during his tenure as the Director General, there was a rather presumptuous 17-year-old who wrote to him from Ethiopia and said, "I really want to do rice research, and I'm particularly interested in tissue culture." And that 17-year-old was me. And he wrote back to me within a week. Now, in those days, there was no email, there was no rapid communication. He sat down and he wrote me a letter, which arrived within a couple of weeks. And he said, "If that's what you want to do, this is the place to do it at." So my first introduction to IRI was 39 years ago as an intern, fostered by the vision of a young man who has never forgotten me in the multiple forum and events that he has seen me in. And he's reminded me that he wrote in the letter of recommendation, "One day you will make a distinguished scientist." So my presence here today is a testimony to his vision for me. And I really celebrate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne. And it's really interesting to hear this, especially when we just came up from a session that talked about youth engagement. And this is a real strong...
I was going to say, how do you turn the seed at the table to the seat at the table?
Yeah, and this is exactly the trust that Dr. Swaminathan had on a young 17-year-old girl who was writing to him. And look at where we are today. Once again, congratulations on that. Now I'd like to turn over to Senthil Kumar. And again, you also carry some of Dr. Swaminathan's work and his legacy in what you do today. You are with Africa Rice. You are also bringing his legacy to another continent, which he worked with. So Dr. Swaminathan's work really transcended boundaries and served as an inspiration. And he worked with communities. So I'd like to now turn to you and I'd like to hear from you and your colleagues, like what lessons can we draw again from his work and how does it apply to you? So over to you, Senthil.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good evening to all. It's a very great pleasure to share the podium with the great panel members. I am from India. I born in 1970s, late 70s, or actually 1980. So I born in a farming family, so I have a great affinity to work in farming. So I can easily connect to myself to the farming. That's really helping me in my science career. In 1970s, 80s, we always eat millet. Millet is fill our plate. Rice is rarely some grains spread in the millets. But that changed in 1980s, 90s. All the villages we can have full plate of rice. I'm coming from Tamil Nadu where we grow the semi-dry rice. So then I entered the school and colleges. Then I heard the name Green Revolution, Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, Norman Borlaug brought this semi-dwarf wheat varieties and rice varieties. So I see myself the change from millet eating society to rice eating society. And then now it's India producing, sufficient rice. And actually we are going back to millet again because we are eating too much of rice now. So, so that's the story. I see how much Dr. M.S. Swaminathan contributed for the green revolution in India. So for us, in the entire school and college, it's about agriculture means green revolution means Dr. M.S. Swaminathan. That's all we hear in the schools and colleges. So I understand that the influence of Dr. M.S. Swaminathan influencing Indian government in the planning process. We have this planning commission, and he was member of many commissions advising the Indian government on what to be done on irrigation, fertilizer production, seed system, varietal dissemination, and robust external services. That's made India reaching the self-sufficiency, and then that what we have to do it in Africa as well. So he's a great inspiration for all of us. Indeed, for this meeting, it was my colleague. So I want to give the credit to my colleague, Dr. Eliot Desayavu. He's a scientist who received the Norman Borlaug Field Research Award in 2021. Actually, he was invited for this panel. Somehow he couldn't make it because of the visa issue, so I'm just filling in his place. So he's shared his thoughts on how Dr. M.S. Swaminathan's remarkable work has significantly influenced his approach and the work he has been doing at Africa Rise. I briefly share what he wrote for your hearing. So Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, renowned as the father of Indian Green Revolution, transformed agriculture through innovations that increased crop yields and addressed food insecurity. His work on introducing high-yielding varieties, improved water management, and promoting sustainable farming techniques set a global precedent for science-driven agricultural development. This legacy very much inspired him as well as me by demonstrating how science can drive large-scale transformation in agricultural systems. Dr. Swaminathan's focus on reducing hunger while ensuring environmental sustainability nicely inspires the objectives of our work, focusing on climate-smart agriculture, which seeks to enhance food production in a rapidly changing climate, particularly in the rice-based systems across Africa, while limiting greenhouse gas emissions, especially methane emissions, and biodiversity and ecosystem service loss. Our efforts to develop resilient agricultural practices that address climate change in Africa have been greatly influenced by Dr. Swaminathan's holistic approach to farming, which integrated agronomy, environmental health, and the socioeconomic well-being. Some of the examples include the co-design of land and water development in inland valleys, with farmers and co-evaluation of its agronomic and economic performance, as well as the barriers and enabling conditions for large adoption by men and women farmers. This approach in Africa Rise we call smart valleys is adapted over 10 African countries, greatly contributing to mitigating drought and flood effects in rice cultivation. Another example is related to the co-design of the integrated rice-fish systems suitable to the farmers' local context, with the aim to increase rice yield, fish growth, food availability, and nutrition in Africa. As Dr. Swaminathan pioneered the use of scientific knowledge to adapt agriculture to local conditions and improve food security, we are applying similar principles to African contexts, focusing on climate resilience of rice production systems. This alignment in values, science-led sustainable agricultural innovation for the betterment of the society, made by Dr. Swaminathan's groundbreaking work, a great source of inspiration to the definitions of our objectives of our work to improve food security in the fact of climate change with limited environmental impacts. So we thank the organizing committee for this insightful event, which I believe is fitting tribute to Dr. Swaminathan and will inspire millions of young scientists pursuing a career in agriculture research. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Now again, I like to emphasize this, that Dr. Swaminathan was very much a man of science. He believed in science a lot and he used science a lot. But right in the heart of it is always the people first. It's always for the people. That drove him. That was his guiding principle. And another person who really put people at the forefront and with her people-centric approaches in fish systems is our 2021 World Food Prize Laureate, Shakuntala Tilsted. Now, Shakuntala, in your words, what do you see? What can we learn from Dr. Swaminathan's work? And how then, again, do we bring it forward to inspire more people to carry on this legacy?
Thanks, Ben. And I will talk about my personal experience and how I used the work and the legacy of Dr. Swaminathan in my own work. Of course, as an undergraduate student at the University of the West Indies studying agriculture, I had read about the Green Revolution in India and all the work that Dr. Swaminathan had done. But I didn't use that because I wasn't working with rice in Trinidad. Then in the early 1990s, I went to Bangladesh to work. And I worked in a totally different field. I worked with nutrition rehabilitation of malnourished children. And I worked together with Bangladeshi colleagues in setting up nutrition rehabilitation centers in communities. And the first thing I said to my Bangladeshi colleagues, I said, before we begin this work, let us go to India and visit the work that the MS Swaminathan Foundation is doing in communities. And we did so. And we learned about the community approach and community participation. And one thing we found out, you talked about it, Madhura. So we had to set up these centers for malnourished children in the communities. And what we learned from visiting the MS Swaminathan Foundation and their work in communities, that it was very, very important where we would place the centers. Because if the centers, for example, were placed too close to the markets, too close to the markets, then we will not be able to get the people of the lower caste to cross the markets and come to the center. So the first thing was with the geographies that we had to choose in order to ensure that all community members had access to the nutrition rehabilitation center. And then we learned also from the work of MS Swaminathan how we would work both with women, with mothers and fathers and grandmothers and sisters in setting up the programs for nutrition rehabilitation because the community approach was so very important. I remember also what struck us is that if you have because they were doing in the MS Swaminathan Foundation communities, they were doing school. The schools were being used, and in the evenings, the schools were being used for teaching the parents of the children. And I do remember that. So when we set up our nutrition rehabilitation centers in the evenings, we use the centers for teaching the mothers and fathers about what was important for nutrition for children. So we brought back those learnings from the MS Swaminathan communities back to Bangladesh. Then when I was awarded the World Food Prize in 2021, of course, everybody was making this comparison to the first World Food Prize Laureate being from India, and that I was the first woman of Indian descent being awarded the prize. And I very much wanted to do an interview where we would sit over for each other and we would talk about feeding, and how do you feed the hungry, and then how would you move this agenda to nourishing all people, taking into consideration the fundamental right of food for all people. We never got to do that because then COVID came, and then it was too late. But I was really very happy at his birthday in 2022. I did online. I did the birthday address for him, and then it became too late, and we never had that opportunity to do this interview together. And so I was very sad about it. And talking with Ben about it, we said, but we can do something, and this is why we set up this event. So I'm so very, very happy to have that all of the people I have invited to talk about Dr. Swaminathan showed up and has shared their experiences and what he meant as a visionary leader. And thank you all for coming and being part of this session.
Thank you, Shakuntala. Now, a tribute won't be complete if it's only by 5 people here at the front paying tribute to a man. So I'm actually now opening the floor to anyone from the audience. If you'd like to just share a word or two on the work of Dr. Swaminathan and how it perhaps helped shape you, change you, framed your thoughts and everything. So I do invite anyone from the floor who would like to share a word or two.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Kenneth Quinn. I'm the President Emeritus of the World Food Prize. I had to go to the Africa event, and it's a long trip from Africa to India, but I made it here in the nonstop plane to get here because I just had to be here to honor your father and my great mentor, who when I came to take over the World Food Prize, unlike Dr. Borlaug and Dr. Swaminathan and all of you, and probably all of you, I have no background in agriculture, and so I had much to learn, much to be inspired by. If somebody said, well, tell me one thing that you would say about M.S. Swaminathan, I would tell them this. When Norman Borlaug became older and really could not continue as the chairman of the World Food Prize Laureate Selection Committee, it was to me to say, well, who would we get to do that? Who would have such unassailable integrity that everyone would see that that person is the chair, meant that the selection of the laureates was made only on the basis of achievement in increasing the quality, quantity, and availability of food and confronting hunger and diminishing hunger in the world. Because in an organization where you raise money, you always can be suspected of giving the prize because of who's given you a lot of money. And immediately, there was no debate. There were no short list of people. The one and only person who I felt certain would be able to continue that integrity was Dr. M.S. Swaminathan. And of course, it proved correct. And our choices of laureates continued at a high level. And your dad and our hero continued what Dr. Borlaug had implanted, and that is we're picking the individuals who truly belong as part of the great, as I say, all-star team of the single greatest period of food production and hunger reduction in all human history, led by Dr. Borlaug and the Dean of the Laureate Corps, Dr. M.S. Swaminathan. So the reason I came here from this was to have this chance. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. If I could say, I have one talking about how can we spread this knowledge of him. I think one, I don't know if India has made a stamp of him, but he should be on a stamp. And right? Yes, so that people, I don't know, people mail letters anymore, or maybe that doesn't make sense. Yeah, I'm, showing my age, and that. But on my short list, my bucket list of things to do is I had a vision of making a Bollywood movie called The Green Revolution. I'm not sure who's, there's got to be some really handsome Indian movie star who would play M.S. Swaminathan, but I plan to audition for the role of Norman Borlaug. The gray-haired old guy who can't dance or sing at all, trying to up there, and telling the story of the Green Revolution through the medium that everyone will see and know. So if you know some producers who are up for this, connected or that, no, I'm still interested. I've got a script.
Ambassador Queen, I do have a proposition for you. Nowadays, we do not need producers. We just need to look for the youth and get them to do a 30-second TikTok for you.
Oh.
A 30-second TikTok and make sure that you go viral. It is the best recognition. We can extend it to 2 minutes. I think that'll be fine.
Yeah, I have a Taylor Swift. Yep. Yeah, Taylor. I don't like it. Taylor Swift's latest song, I'm grinning like I'm winning, but I'm hitting my mark. And I can still do it with a broken hip.
Thanks.
At least some of the young women are laughing. They get it.
I still like to open up this opportunity for anyone who just like to give a word or two in recognition of the legacy and the man himself. So, anyone? Yes, Jorge.
I just have a story about when I actually met him. It was 2017 at the Dialogue. I was a Borlaug Roy intern at that time, and I was presenting my research from what I did at Summit. And I remember after all the presentations were done, just saw this man sitting in the audience, and everybody was trying to talk to him. And I was wondering, why is everyone trying to talk to this man? So I just decided to go up, pay respects, and shook his hand, said hello. He just gave me a grin, and that was about it. But it was after that where I learned that who he was, and he was the first recipient of the World Food Prize. And after that, I was like, okay, this is why everyone's trying to meet him. But I would say from back then, I was 18, and I was just thinking to myself, I think I kind of want to be like this person. He's very popular, but popular in the sense of what he has done. And that kind of was one of the side interactions I had to want to go into agriculture. So now I'm getting my PhD in fertilizer development from waste, and just want to keep going and hopefully be somewhat like him one day.
Thank you so much, Jorge. And I really hope that, this story gets carried further out beyond this room. And I'm very sure that the stories of Dr. M.S. Swaminathan will continue to inspire people. We really have to carry his story forwards. And allow me now to conclude this session by introducing to you this book. This is a German edition of the Review of Agrarian Studies. We actually have 50 copies of this tonight to be distributed to the audience. So feel free to come up to me and get a copy of this. This is a very special edition because it is an actual edition that's dedicated in the memory of Dr. M.S. Swaminathan. Now, before I conclude tonight, on behalf of the Nutrition Impact Platform, we also have a special tribute to him. So may I please get the next video? Thank you.
I went to Delhi and started my work on plant breeding. Then went to Holland because a very small country like Holland is able to not only feed themselves, but they are so prosperous agriculturally. There was a lot to learn from them. Then went to Cambridge to do my PhD degree. Then I was at the University of Wisconsin. When I had to take a decision in 1954, the president of the University of Wisconsin offered me a very fine position as associate professor at a young age. But I told him, sir, I came abroad to equip myself to serve my country. I didn't come abroad to settle down abroad. But the point is very clear, that we must work for self-reliance in food, and there should be no hunger in the country. And those were the motivations which molded my entire scientific, educational and research career. I had received the World Food Prize and a few other prizes. I had the cash. I never take any prize for my personal use because I know whatever I do is the work of jointly a large number of colleagues, students, friends, and co-workers. Therefore, to take any of them for my personal use, I thought was not ethical. And therefore, I kept it all separately and started a trust. What I meant by evergreen revolution means increase in productivity in perpetuity without ecological damage.
Thank you so much for watching this. And on behalf of the CGIAR Nutrition Impact Platform, firstly, I'd like to thank the panelists for taking their evening, joining us here, and really sharing their stories. And as you can hear, they were all personal stories. They all touched, Dr. Swaminathan touched our lives in many different ways. So once again, thank you so much to the panel out at the front. I also like to thank the World Food Prize Foundation for sharing with us a lot of all these images, which unfortunately we will not be able to get them if I did not write to the World Food Prize Foundation. So thank you so much, everyone. And please enjoy the reception, the small reception that we have. Thank you. Oh, and please remember to come up to me and get a copy of this book if you like it. Thank you.